History of Western Civilization 2. The discovery of oil in the Middle East. The history of the discovery and production of oil in the Middle East exemplifies the resource curse. Countries with an abundance of natural resources, specifically non-renewable resources like oil, tend to have less economic growth, less democracy, and worse development outcomes than countries with fewer natural resources. In March of 1908, after years of difficult conditions and failure, geologist George Bernard Reynolds discovered oil in Persia, modern-day Iran. A year later, an oil company in the UK, Burma Oil, created a subsidiary company to develop oil production in Persia, the Anglo-Persian Oil Company, APOC, which started volume production of oil by 1913. Britain's Royal Navy was under the leadership of Winston Churchill, who wanted to shift its fuel source from coal to oil. The Navy thus became the company's major customer and a de facto hidden power behind its success. Iranian popular opposition to the APOC's royalty terms, whereby Iran only received 16% of net profits, was widespread and created political discontent throughout the country. In 1941, during World War II, Britain and the USSR invaded Iran, exiled Reza Shah, and put his son, Reza Pahlavi, who was friendlier to their interests, onto the throne. Following World War II, nationalistic sentiments were on the rise in the Middle East, most notably in Iran, and the Iranian parliament voted to nationalize the oil industry. At the same time, the public elected Mohammad Mossadegh as prime minister, causing the Abadan crisis. Britain was unable to subvert Mossadegh, so British and American intelligence agencies orchestrated a coup d'état to overthrow him and bring Reza Pahlavi back onto the throne. By 1954, now with a pro-Western leader in place, oil production started again under the control of a new cartel named the Seven Sisters, completely based outside the Middle East. Petroleum politics have been an increasingly important aspect of diplomacy since the rise of the petroleum industry in the Middle East in the early 20th century. As competition continues for a vital resource, the strategic calculations of major and minor countries alike place prominent emphasis on the pumping, refining, transport, sale and use of petroleum products. However, international climate policy and unconventional oil and gas developments may change the balance of power between petroleum exporting and importing countries, with major negative implications expected for the exporting states. 1. From around 2015 and onwards, there was growing discussion about whether the geopolitics of oil and gas would be replaced by new geopolitical patterns related to access to renewable energy sources such as sun and wind and critical materials for renewable energy technologies. The term petro-aggression has been used to describe the tendency of oil-rich states to instigate international conflicts. 5. There are many examples including Iraq's invasion of Iran and Kuwait, Libya's repeated incursions into Chad in the 1970s and 1980s, Iran's long-standing suspicion of Western powers. Some scholars have also suggested that oil-rich states are frequently the targets of resource wars. The Anglo-Persian Oil Company. The history of the oil industry in Iran is representative of the effects of the discovery of oil in the Middle East, and a prime example of the resource curse, the paradox that countries with an abundance of natural resources, specifically non-renewable resources like minerals and fuels, tend to have less economic growth, less democracy, and worse development outcomes than countries with fewer natural resources. It is characterized by political and military conflict, in this case caused by British and American interests in the oil industry. The secret of the seven dancing sisters of oil industry. Seven Sisters was a common term for the seven transnational oil companies of the Consortium for Iran oligopoly or cartel, which dominated the global petroleum industry from the mid-1940s to the mid-1970s. Alluding to the seven mythological Pleiades sisters fathered by the Titan Atlas, the business usage was popularized in the 1950s by businessman Enrico Mattei, then head of the Italian state oil company Eni. The industry group consisted of 1, 2, 3. Anglo-Iranian Oil Company, originally Anglo-Persian, now BP. Royal Dutch Shell. Standard Oil Company of California, SoCal, later Chevron. Gulf Oil, now merged into Chevron. Texaco, now merged into Chevron. Standard Oil Company of New Jersey, Esso, later Exxon, now part of ExxonMobil. Standard Oil Company of New York, SoConey, later Mobil, now part of ExxonMobil. Preceding the 1973 oil crisis, the Seven Sisters controlled around 85% of the world's petroleum reserves. Since then, industry dominance has shifted to the OPEC cartel and state-owned oil and gas companies in emerging market economies, such as Saudi Aramco, Gazprom, Russia, China National Petroleum Corporation, National Iranian Oil Company, PDVSA, Venezuela, Petrobras, Brazil, and Petronas, Malaysia. In 2007, the Financial Times called these the new Seven Sisters. 2.5. According to consulting firm Private First Class Energy, by 2012 only 7% of the world's known oil reserves were in countries that allowed private international companies free rein. Fully 65% were in the hands of state-owned companies. 6. Thank you for listening and have subscribed to this channel.